Picture a man standing alone on the deck of a ship. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction. Gray, silent, massive. The wind cuts through his coat. His hands are wrapped tightly around a small cloth bag. Inside that bag, a tiny golden trophy. It weighs less than 4 kilograms. And yet, this little object was about to change the way 6 billion human beings would feel on the same day, every 4 years. No one hired this man for the job. No government ordered him to go. Most people around him thought he had lost his mind. But he was smiling, because he believed in something most people could not yet see. Today, we are going to trace that belief from a cold, rainy field in Scotland in 1872, all the way to stadiums shaking with the voices of 100,000 strangers. This is the story of a game that was never just a game. November 30th, 1872. A muddy field in Glasgow, Scotland. 2 teams walked out. One in dark blue jerseys, one in white. England versus Scotland. About 4,000 people stood watching in the cold. The match lasted 90 minutes. Nobody scored. The result was 0-0. By every measure of modern sport, it was completely forgettable. And yet it was the most important football match ever played, because it was the first official international football match in the history of the world. Think about what that means. 2 nations agreed to settle something, not on a battlefield, not in a courtroom, but on a football pitch, with 11 players and a ball. The idea seemed small. The consequences were enormous. Football spread from Britain to Europe, from Europe to South America, from South America to Africa, Asia, and every corner of the planet. Everywhere it arrived, people fell in love with it, instantly. A game invented by English schoolboys somehow became the common language of the entire human race. Nobody planned that. It simply happened. That man on the ship had a name. Jules Rimet. He was sailing to Uruguay. The year was 1930. The Great Depression had just begun. The world was exhausted and afraid. Rimet had spent years writing letters, making phone calls, traveling in person to football associations across Europe, begging them to come. Most of Europe said no. The journey by ship took 2 weeks each way. Money was short. The timing felt impossible. But Rimet carried an idea that refused to be practical. He believed that when nations play football against each other, they understood each other a little better. He had no evidence for this. He simply believed it completely. 4 European nations finally agreed to make the journey: France, Belgium, Yugoslavia, and Romania. Romania's squad was chosen personally by their king. King Carol II read through the list of players himself and signed off on each name. Imagine that, a king selecting a football squad. That is how much this first tournament mattered. 13 nations crossed the ocean by ship and arrived in Montevideo, Uruguay. On July 13, 1930, a French forward named Lucien Laurent received the ball, swung his foot, and struck a clean volley into the net. It was the first goal ever scored in a FIFA World Cup. Laurent was 23 years old that day. Barely anyone alive today can tell you his name. And perhaps that is the first great mystery of this tournament, that it was born not in glory, but in near total obscurity. And somehow, it survived to become the most watched event in human history. Uruguay won that first final against Argentina, 4-2. Rimet walked onto the pitch and handed over the trophy himself. His crazy idea had worked. But the tournament had a lesson it would repeat again and again, in different ways, across different decades. In football, no result is ever guaranteed. The giant can fall. The unknown can win. Certainty is an illusion. Nowhere was this proven more dramatically than in 1950. Brazil, the Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, the largest stadium ever constructed, packed with over 200,000 people. Brazil was the host nation. Brazil was the overwhelming favorite. The country had already begun celebrating in the streets, before the final match was even played. Their opponent in the deciding game? Uruguay, the same small nation from across the river. Brazil needed only a draw to win the tournament. Uruguay scored, then Uruguay scored again. Final result, Uruguay 2, Brazil 1. 200,000 people fell silent at the exact same moment. That silence did not stay inside the stadium. It spread across the entire country like a wave. Journalists, who were there that day, wrote that they had never heard anything like it. The sound of 200,000 hearts breaking at exactly the same second. This event is still known as the Maracanazo, the Great Maracana Shock. Decades later, the man who scored Uruguay's winning goal was asked how it felt. He smiled and said, "Only 3 people have ever truly silenced the Maracana: Frank Sinatra, the Pope, and me." 8 years later, in 1958, a 17-year-old boy boarded a plane to Sweden. He had grown up in such poverty that when he was a child, he could not afford a football. So he practiced with a grapefruit stuffed into a sock, and the grapefruit never stood a chance. His father had been a footballer who never quite made it to the highest level. The boy made a silent promise to himself. He would go further. His name was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. The world would call him Pelé. At the 1958 World Cup in Sweden, Pelé became the youngest player in history to appear in a World Cup final. He scored twice. Brazil won 5-2. After the final whistle, Pelé collapsed onto the pitch. He could not stand. His teammates had to carry him off the field. He was 17 years old, and he was already the greatest footballer on the planet. There is something almost frightening about talent that complete, that young. As if the universe made one decision and kept it without compromise. But the story of Brazil's golden era does not belong to Pelé alone. At the 1962 World Cup, Pelé was injured early and could not continue. Most teams would have collapsed without their best player. Brazil had someone else. Garrincha is one of the most extraordinary stories in football. His name was Manuel Francisco dos Santos. Everyone called him Garrincha. It means little bird in Portuguese. He grew up in deep poverty in the Brazilian countryside. As a child, doctors examined his legs and delivered a verdict. His left leg curved inward. His right leg curved outward. He would never run properly. Garrincha went on to become one of the greatest dribblers in the entire history of football. Perhaps the doctors were right about his legs. They were wrong about everything else. In 1962, with Pelé sidelined, Garrincha carried Brazil almost entirely on his own. He was unstoppable. He was joyful. He played football as if it were the most wonderful thing in the world, because for him, it truly was. Brazil won their second World Cup. And then came 1970. Mexico. The heat, the dust, the dry pitches. Brazil arrived with something the world had never seen before and has not seen since in quite the same way. 11 players who moved as if they shared one mind. The final against Italy ended 4-1. The fourth goal, Carlos Alberto running onto a pass from Pelé, striking the ball without breaking stride, is still called the greatest team goal in World Cup history. After the final whistle, Pelé stood alone in the center of the pitch. Tears ran down his face. A photographer took a picture of that moment. For an entire generation, that photograph was the World Cup. Not a trophy, not a scoreline, just one man crying with joy in the middle of a field. Not every chapter of this story is beautiful. In 1942, there was no World Cup. In 1946, there was no World Cup. The Second World War had swallowed the world. Stadiums were turned into military bases. Players became soldiers. Jules Rimet's dream was on hold, and the trophy itself was in danger. When German forces occupied Rome, a FIFA vice president named Ottorino Barassi made a quiet decision. He walked into the FIFA offices. He picked up the Jules Rimet trophy. He wrapped it in an old cloth, placed it inside a shoebox, and hid it under his bed. For 3 years, while bombs fell and armies moved across Europe, that golden trophy sat in a shoebox in a private bedroom. Barassi checked it every single night before sleeping. He told almost nobody it was there. He was right to be afraid. He was right to be careful. Because in 1966, in London, the trophy was stolen. In broad daylight. Just days before the tournament began. The entire country searched. Police searched. Ordinary citizens searched. 4 days passed with no result. Then a dog named Pickles, a black and white collie, was sniffing around a garden in South London. He found a package wrapped in newspaper under a bush. Inside was the Jules Rimet trophy. Pickles became a national hero. He received fan mail. He appeared on television. A dog had saved the World Cup. Somewhere in the universe, that fact has to mean something. The tournament kept growing, and as it grew, it opened its doors wider. The first World Cup had 13 teams, almost all from Europe and South America. For decades, Africa, Asia, and North America watched from the outside. At the 1966 World Cup in England, every African nation boycotted the tournament. They had been given no guaranteed qualifying places. Their message was direct. We exist. We will not be invisible. The protest worked. From 1970 onward, Africa had its own guaranteed spots. In 1994, the World Cup traveled to the United States, a country where football was barely known. American children watched those matches. They grew up. They built one of the strongest football leagues in the world. In 2010, for the first time in history, the World Cup arrived in Africa. South Africa. The sound of the vuvuzela, that long, loud horn, filled stadiums and living rooms around the entire world. It was not just a football tournament. It was a continent standing up and saying, "This game belongs to us too. We are here. We have always been here." In 2022, Morocco arrived in Qatar as an unheralded side from North Africa. Match by match, they defeated Belgium, they defeated Spain, they defeated Portugal. They became the first African team in the history of the World Cup to reach the semifinals. Their star player was Achraf Hakimi, born and raised in Madrid. His mother had cleaned houses in Spain so her son could have a better life. When Hakimi scored the decisive penalty against Spain, he ran to the stands. He found his mother. A photographer captured that image. A son and his mother. The entire weight of the journey, all of it, in one photograph. Millions of people shared that image who had never watched a single football match in their lives. And now, my friends, we arrive at this moment, June 2026. For the first time in history, the World Cup will be shared across 3 nations, the United States, Mexico, and Canada. 48 teams, 16 cities, more nations than ever before stepping onto that stage for the very first time. On the day the opening match begins, roughly 6 billion people will be watching. More than 3/4 of every human being currently alive on this earth. They will watch in living rooms and in open fields, on phones and on ancient televisions, alone and in crowds, in languages that share no common words, from cultures that have almost nothing else in common. But at the exact moment the referee raises that whistle to his whips, every single one of them will understand exactly what is about to happen, at the same second, across the entire planet. Think about Jules Rimet on that ship in 1930, holding a small golden trophy in a bag, standing on a gray ocean, alone with an idea that most people called foolish. He was not carrying a trophy. He was carrying a belief that football could be a language every human being already spoke. He had no proof. He had no guarantee. He just kept going. And the world changed because he did. That quiet thing inside you, the belief you carry that others cannot yet see, that is not small. It has never been small. That has always been enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me today. Now, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, which moment from this story surprised you most? Was it the shoebox under the bed? Was it Pickles the dog? Was it Hakimi running to his mother? Leave a like if this story gave you something. And find the subscribe button, because every week we bring you a story like this one. Until next time, take care of yourself. I will see you soon.